My name is Charly, Bedrossian, actually, like I was saying, and I represent here today the Cannabis College and also the company that sponsors it, Sensi Seeds, for which I work as well. We sell cannabis genetics, but that's not the point today. The Cannabis College is a free information center about cannabis, so we are here to provide information to absolutely anyone about all the different possible uses of the cannabis plant. We opened in Amsterdam in 1998, so it's been 21 years already, and we have been providing information either to actually curious tourists or actually serious medical users since then. We, like you can see, try to provide information about industrial uses of hemp, nutritional or medical aspects of a cannabis plant, safe user information. That's kind of the reason I'm wearing this ridiculously hot jacket that I'm going to take off immediately because it's way too warm. But for example, this is one of the best industrial applications of hemp. This jacket is made literally of hemp, and inside is a mix of hemp and recycled bottles. In Amsterdam, when it's -5, -10 degrees Celsius, I'm too warm already wearing it. So it's definitely way too warm for Nimbin. So we also don't actually give lessons, classes, tuitions, or diplomas, but anyone who actually wish to learn anything about the cannabis plant is more than welcome to come and visit us and either check our library or either one of the speeches we have. We always have international speakers coming from all around the world. You can see Nick Bradley, for example, from California here. We had Robert Connor Clark, Ed Rosenthal. Actually, lots of different people from different perspectives, either from growers, studies, medical users, medical associations from differently all around the world come to visit us. Like you can see, we also provide vaporizers, actually as safe use for cannabis users. Whoever wants to come in and use our vaporizers is free to do so. So of course we have very serious things, but we also have been actually named, for example, in the Trailer Park Boys, we are in one of the episodes, or the Basketball Wives as well. Or we've been more seriously, actually, Canadian television showing how to do thin layer chromatography testing to determine cannabinoid levels in some samples. Quickly, I would like to present you all my colleagues. We actually make and volunteers who are helping the Cannabis College to still be alive today and provide information to all the visitors we have. Well, this is all the different people who actually are giving their time and actually sharing their knowledge with everyone coming to see us. So of course, the information part is one part of what we do. The most important part also of the Cannabis College is the garden we have downstairs. We've been growing cannabis for a pretty long time. At first, when we opened, we had 20 volunteers, and in the Netherlands, technically it's 5 plants per building. They've tried to play a little bit with the law and said, we're 20 volunteers, let's put 5 plants per person and have 100 plants downstairs. That did not work. A couple of months later, the police came in. They asked us to take most of the plants away. And unfortunately, we are forced to have only 5 plants maximum at all time in the premises. So here you have actually pictures of our old garden because, of course, in 21 years, it's been evolving a lot. And this is actually what our garden looks like today. I'm going to show you a better view of what we do. We have rooms that are 1.50 m by 1.50 m with different kinds of lightings. We're going to have plants in different stages so people can actually see plants either in the vegetative stage or different stages of flowering, and also different methods that we can use for cannabis growing. So this is our grow vegetative area. As you can see, plants will just be growing there before going in one of the next flowering rooms. So once again, I have to remind that this kind of growing in the Netherlands will be completely forbidden. We are allowed, thankfully, to the City Hall for educational purposes to have 5 plants under artificial light, but behind windows as display. Those plants cannot be sold to coffee shops, they cannot be given away to visitors. Me being the head gardener of a Cannabis College, I cannot take advantage of them and actually take them home to smoke them. Those plants literally will all be destroyed at the end of the flowering cycle. So yeah, we actually can see roughly the environment where we work in, and our working room with lots of bags of soil at the back. So how did everything started? The Cannabis College, before being the Cannabis College, was founded by a group in Amsterdam called the Green Prisoners. The Green Prisoner release in Amsterdam was actually militating for the release of a couple that was from the United States and immigrated to the Netherlands for cannabis-related offenses. It's actually the case of Les and Cheryl Mooring. Les had the first offense concerning cannabis. He got caught the first time growing 40 plants. He got caught a second time growing cannabis and also being in the possession of a firearm. So he was actually facing a 35-year sentence. His wife, Cheryl, had nothing to do with it, but actually as an accomplice, she was facing a 15-year sentence. So for this reason, the couple extradited to the Netherlands. The problem is that in the Netherlands, cannabis laws are not as nice or as enjoyable as everybody might think. The problem is that the Dutch drug law policy is very hypocrite on the way coffee shops are supplied or where cannabis comes from. We're going to see that in a couple minutes. Just to finish quickly with Les and Cheryl, after a couple of years of fighting, they unfortunately got extradited to the United States with reduced sentence, but still, unfortunately, they got extradited. This is the reason why, after they unfortunately lost this battle, the Green Prisoner Release Group of Amsterdam decided to found the Cannabis College, and we're still here to try to actually give information and educate people about cannabis to avoid simply ridiculous cases like this one happening again. So the Dutch drug policy is one of a kind because as a cannabis user, you are allowed to go in a coffee shop as long as you are over 18 years old and purchase 5 grams of cannabis, either flowers, buds, or hashish. It is tolerated, not allowed, to have 5 plants maximum per house, but only using natural sunlight outdoor. The problem, once again, the weather of the Netherlands is not the most suitable for cannabis growing. It's a little bit humid and cold, just as humid as Nimbin today, but a little bit colder. So, yeah, for cannabis growing is not the best conditions. Only licensed coffee shops are allowed to actually sell cannabis in small quantities, 5 grams maximum per person over 18 years old. They are not allowed to have over 500 grams in the premises. They cannot sell any concentrates like hash oil, dabs, wax, or whatsoever. And the problem is that no one is allowed to grow for the coffee shops, to supply them. Basically, the marijuana and hashish of the coffee shop has to appear by magic behind the counter. Thanks to the little hash fairy. No, being more seriously, unfortunately, coffee shop owners are forced to actually have what we call the backdoor system. It's a gray area, which is a really hypocrite name to say they have to go on the black market, what we call the black market. They will just buy quantities of flowers or hashish to whoever has actually material available to sell, so they can resell it again. How everything started, it's a little bit complicated, but so you know, even Dutch people do not understand the law about soft drugs in the Netherlands. If you don't worry, it's very normal. But in the 60s, what happened, we had actually lots of hashish that was coming from Lebanon and Afghanistan, and the very first coffee shops kind of appeared. At the time, they were not called coffee shops, it was very simple. You had a basement, a garage, a barn with a couple of cushions around, and a friend that could bring you a pretty big quantity of hashish. You had a coffee shop, roughly. In the 70s, well, actually, we had a minister that made some research, actually on a social level, and also at the time, we also have to point out, we had a big crisis with heroin in Europe, and mostly in the Netherlands. What happened, the government decided to literally chase heroin dealers to help heroin users actually with substitution programs. And when it came to the cannabis question, well, they realized that socially speaking, cannabis was not such a dangerous product. Smokers were not really dangerous to society, except to themselves, sometimes being a little bit too lazy. So yeah, why not? We're actually going to start tolerating. That was the start of a basis of a tolerance policy. The problem is that since 1976, when the Geloofbeleid, the politics that is still applied today has been voted, well, nothing has been done. It's been over 40 years, and we are still waiting for cannabis to be legal, one way or another, in the Netherlands. What happened in the 80s, well, we started having new regulations. People start thinking, we're going to make a license system for coffee shops. So basically, you have a license that allows you to be a cannabis dealer. Those licenses are pretty expensive, so you know you cannot get a license like this from the city hall anymore. You have to buy it from someone who retires. The last license that was for sale in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, auction started around 600,000 euros and ended up at 2.5 million. So 2.5 million euros, I think it's about 3 million Australian dollars, roughly. It's actually quite a lot of money. This just gives you a piece of paper and a license that allows you actually to sell cannabis. But you have to ask the city hall, where are you allowed to open it? And how do you provide yourself is completely illegal. If you get caught actually buying or supplying your coffee shop, you will go in front of a judge and you will lose your license. If you have alcohol, if you have a minor or hard drugs in a coffee shop, you will lose your license. A license that is lost forever. The owner cannot sell it again. And like I was explaining you, those licenses sell actually for a lot of money. This is how actually coffee shop owners make their retirement. Most of the time is not for all the quantities of cannabis maybe selling for all those years. It's actually selling holding a license for 20, 25 years and then selling it again to the market. In the 90s, we started having way stricter rules, and those rules basically are the ones. So no advertising is allowed, so no coffee shop can have a small little cannabis leaf or saying weed, ganja, grass, whatsoever. It just can say coffee shop, nothing else. Like I was explaining you, no hard drugs are tolerated inside a coffee shop. This is definitely a motive of closing a coffee shop as well. Nuisance concerning the noise. You are not allowed to open after 1 in the morning and not allowed to open before 8. Youth, you have to protect the kids, and of course, no minor, no one under 18 years old is allowed to go inside a coffee shop. Believe me or not, I've seen this scene. A teenager goes inside a coffee shop, shows his ID to the owner. It's 10 in the evening, I will be 18 at midnight. Can you please sell me 2 grams of weed? Well, take your ID, come back in 2 hours, I close, 1 hour after your birthday, after midnight, no problem. Right now, it's out of question. Why? Because it's very simple. There's a police officer in the coffee shop at this moment and sees the scene happening. That person, once again, loses his license. And the last measure that is taken, grams, 500 grams maximum allowed in a coffee shop. In all the premises, all material included, flowers and hashish. Realistically speaking, a coffee shop has about 50 customers per hour. People are allowed to buy up to 5 grams at the time. 500 grams, they go very, very fast. That's a problem. Once actually your 500 grams are gone, if you're not allowed to buy cannabis, if you're not allowed to grow it, technically you are out of business. That is a little bit of the issue we have. So the supplying of a coffee shop, it becomes very inventive, and you can see very funny scenes on how people actually manage to bring cannabis behind the counter. Very, very different techniques, but we're not gonna go way too much on that. But 500 grams is the limit, and 501 gram is already enough to lose your license once again. Well, in the 2000s, rules became a little bit more strict because we had a brand new Prime Minister, Mr. Opstelten, who decided to vote what we named the Witpass. The Witpass was a measure saying, if you're not from the Netherlands, if you're not a Dutch citizen or a Dutch resident, you will not have access to coffee shops and to cannabis anymore. This is a little bit under pressure of other European Union governments such as Germany or France, because we have lots of young tourists coming absolutely every weekend to Amsterdam to enjoy coffee shops, and sometimes they actually think they can take little souvenirs with them back home without any problem. Of course, you cannot cross borders with cannabis in Europe, even if it's tolerated in some countries, and this is one of the issues. So in Amsterdam, we actually had a small problem, is that we are a touristic destination. If you forbid tourists to go to coffee shops, you just simply kill the economy of a city. Not just for coffee shops, but hotels, restaurants, the entire economy of the city collapses. So the mayor of Amsterdam, when this measure was announced, simply said no to the government. Well, they kind of arrived to an arrangement, but a very old law that was not applied yet in Amsterdam had to, is the 250-meter rule. No coffee shop is allowed closer than 250 meters from a kindergarten, a school, a university, a hair salon, teaching center. As long as you have kids and education mixed, you can have a coffee shop 250 meters near this premise. Amsterdam is a small city, and it becomes harder and harder to find a place which is not 250 meters close to a school. This is the very big hypocrite system we're living in. We also had actually a new rule that was 15% THC maximum allowed in the flowers in coffee shop, which is kind of a ridiculous point because we don't have one compound in cannabis, we have several compounds, obviously, and 15%, why? We have even doctors and scientists, the most actually respectable university teachers from the Netherlands, even went to ask the government, why 15%? It does not make any sense. And this law, even if it's supposed to be applied, nowadays you take a sample of a coffee shop, but in the Netherlands, you will be pretty surely most of the time way over 15%. It will be more, it will be around 18, 20%, roughly. So this is actually the very hypocrite Dutch system we have. In Europe, you're going to show you a quick overview of what's going on in different European countries. If you go to Spain, for example, well, in Spain we don't have coffee shops, but we have cannabis social clubs. It's very simple. The idea is really good. People gather together, they make a collective to grow cannabis, and they share it between the members. So as a member of a cannabis social club, you pay fees to be a member and the fees to help actually what the grow is going to cost, which is buying seeds, for example, or renting a local, and so on and so on. You can see a menu, for example, and a small association in Barcelona. Now, the hypocrisy of the Spanish government is that technically, even if cannabis use is tolerated in the private circle, if you go to a social club, you buy cannabis and try to take it back home and get arrested by the police, having a little bud in your pocket is a €300 fine. And of course, it will be confiscated. Let's say if you have now a grinder that has been used, it's an extra €300 fine. If you have a piece of joint hiding somewhere, it's an extra €300 fine. That's already €900. It's roughly minimum wage per month in Spain. So if you have on top of that a bong and other paraphernalia, yeah, basically you just lost 2 months of salary in fines for cannabis use, even though it's supposed to be tolerated. This is a very, very good example on how hypocrite some countries can be about cannabis users and their tolerance towards users. In Austria, those are pictures I took in a grow shop, and as you can see, plants are growing actually really beautifully in any grow shop you will visit. If I go in Vienna, I can go inside a clone shop, and for actually not so expensive, between 5 and 10 euros, depending on the size, and not even on the genetics, but on the size of the plant, I can go home with a nice little cannabis plant. Now, there is a trick. The trick is that you are allowed to grow as many plants as you want. You're not allowed to flower them. Which is a little bit ridiculous. How come people will put plants in their garden and expect them not to flower? And of course, in the same grow shop, you can buy lamps, grow tents, nutrients, but no, it's not to flower those plants. This is, once again, a very good example of actually European hypocrisy on drugs on quality of drugs. I do not have a side of Portugal, but if we take the case of Portugal, Portugal actually uncriminalized use of all drugs. So as a personal user, you can have a certain amount of any kind of drugs, including cannabis or other substances, for personal use. But buying those drugs and selling those drugs is still completely forbidden. You are allowed to use them, but they have to magically appear in your pocket. Once again, we still have a problem on that. So actually, to show you, yeah, all these systems, they have pros and cons, and one of the biggest cons we have is quality, because at the end of the day, there is absolutely no quality control on the products that are given to the final users. So the next slides I'm going to show you are pictures we've taken in the Cammabis College with our microscope from samples that come from several coffee shops. So we're going to have spider mites. Yummy. So if you actually are vegan, vegetarian, and thinking about making a space cake, you're going to have a little extra protein. Yummy. In these ones, we can see other kind of predators. We even have flies, sometimes coming around buds. Once again, not the kind of buds I would like to smoke. Those samples, like you can see, actually this is hash oil that has been added to it for a cannabis cup sample. That simple, of course, was disqualified. But yeah, just actually to try to trick people, let's actually spray a little bit of hash oil on the flowers to make them a little bit stronger. That big substance, we still have no idea at this day what the hell it was supposed to be, excuse my French. But yeah, definitely this is not supposed to be on your buds. Different kinds of fungus and powdery mildew. Of course, this is due to poor growing conditions. Amsterdam is a very damp, humid environment, so having actually a proper ventilation and a proper growing environment is kind of a challenge. Most of the commercial growers are becoming pretty lazy lately. They only think about weight and not necessarily quality. And this is how come we end up with those products. So for a recreational user, if you use it maybe one time or two, is not such of a big deal. If you're a medical user, yeah, actually that can have serious consequences. Recreational users on the long term also can have serious consequences. We had the case of a gentleman coming from Scotland, all the way from Scotland to Amsterdam, because he literally had fungus in his lungs for over 4 years. After 5 different antifungal treatments, he was still not getting rid of the fungus he had and all this thing he had in his lungs. Very dumb reason, living in Scotland, very dumb and humid environment. Once again, the plant got molded. It was the only plant he had to smoke. Black market was too expensive. He still smoked it. So after 1 month, 2 months, 6 months of smoking actually molded cannabis, he started spitting blood. Went to a doctor, and unfortunately, years after, is still fighting against these kind of things. So this is one of the missions we have, for example, in the Cannabis College. This is no more, none less than simple user prevention. Using for recreational or medical purposes, yes, but not use any kind of quality of flowers. So we could argue that these, obviously, Amsterdam flowers coming from the black market are not necessarily the best quality. We had actually yesterday some speakers from Canada, and we also have actually had a couple of issues even in the legal system. So all those pictures are coming actually from our Canadian friends, and as you can see, even in the legal system, we can still have molded actually cannabis arriving to a final user. Now, technically, legalizing meant actually best quality products for the users. We can see it's definitely not the case. If we go, for example, in the case of California as well, contrary to lots of different states in the US, the Californian model actually went completely the opposite way than it was expected. Unfortunately, you see lots of areas actually being completely used in the middle of the forest for cannabis cultivation. In the humble culti, we have over 6,000 cannabis growers. On those 6,000 growers, only 2,000 of them applied for a license, and only 200 of them obtained that license the day actually licenses were stopped being given. Why? Because you had such a big amount of cannabis growers here and there that bureaucracy and actually the whole system just could not follow all the demands, number one. Number two, actually the Californian demands concerning growers are a little bit demanding. So between the price of a license and the taxes, most of growers just decided to stay on the, actually what we could call the black market, simply because it was completely not worth, financially speaking, to go on the legal side. Now, for example, California is at the moment growing about 60 to 70% of the black market cannabis of the US. And still, we have actually quality issues. Since 2018, new laws have been applied, for example, and all samples need to be tested for heavy pesticides, mycotoxins. A lot of those samples cannot be sold in dispensaries and will be just sold either in different states. And nowadays, we even find Californian cannabis in Amsterdam coffee shops. The difference between what we call Cali weed and Dutch weed, well, quality is not necessarily the best, sincerely speaking, and the price is more than the double. A gram of Cali weed at the moment in Amsterdam is sold between 25 to 40 euros, is roughly the same price than a gram of gold. It's about 50 Australian dollars, unless I'm wrong, which is completely ridiculous. We're talking about a dried flower. It does not make any sense. And now in comparison, we're gonna go actually see what's going on with the world's first producer, which is Morocco. Morocco actually grows 40% of the world cannabis and is only exported in form of hashish. Scenes like this, complete mountains and valleys in the region of Ketama, Chefchaouen, Tétouan are very, very common. Even though if cannabis is still illegal in Morocco, it's illegal to grow it, it's illegal to export it. But some peoples do have the right, historically speaking, to actually grow those plants. What happened is that when the Moroccan king had decided to kick the French colonialists out of Morocco, he went to ask Berberian tribes from the mountains to help him actually kick the French out, which they did. And as a reward, they obtained actually at the time from King Hassan the right actually to grow cannabis in those mountains. As this right has been given away actually to them generations ago, you cannot take it away from them. And this is actually why Morocco is having lots of serious issues with the international community because of those millions of plants. So you imagine what's going on. What we call a small Moroccan farm is a farm that has 150 to 100,000 plants. This is a small Moroccan farm. A big farm is over 1.5 million, 2 million plants. Yeah, this starts to be a serious farm. And those farms, you will have them absolutely all over the desert. We actually tend to speak about, of course, nutrition and so on, and how, for example, cannabis might need actually basic nutrients, such as all the ones we find in the market, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and actually secondary elements. The Moroccan example is actually a very good one on how come you can still grow good quality cannabis literally on rocks with almost no nutrients in the soil. Now, in the specific case of the Cannabis College, we're going to start talking about growing a little bit because I guess it's a little bit funnier than actually talking about sad politics. Well, in our specific case in the Cannabis College, well, our plants in veg, we were showing you the veg room a little bit earlier in that video, we do not use a single fertilizer during the whole vegetation period. Knowing those plants before flowering will grow for a period between 10 to 14 weeks. So it's easily 70 to 100 days or more growing without using a single fertilizer. Just because we're gonna very, very frequently repot our plants. Every 2 weeks, we're gonna have fresh soil which already contains nutrients. Our plants will basically just need good environment and fresh water. For flowering, yeah, presentation is a little bit long. That's a good growing example. You see this plant here has been growing exactly for 70 days before going to flower. You see myself in the room. The room is actually 1.50 m long on 1.50 m wide. Before flowering, the plant was about 1.10 m on 1.10 m, which is already a pretty decent size for only 10 weeks of growing. Once we switch the plants to flower, we arrive literally to fill up the entire room. This is, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties. Ow! So like I was explaining you a little bit earlier, unfortunately in the Cannabis College, all the plants we are growing are only for actually display purposes. We cannot sell them, use them, give them to medical users or whatsoever. But even like this, like we only have very few plants in our garden, we try to have the most beautiful plants we can. And for example, this really nice Ed Rosenthal superbud you can see here actually has been now almost end of flowering. For weeks, had literally no liquid fertilizers but water. She had a little bit of phosphorus and potassium very, very gently 2 times in a period of 8 weeks, only in 2 different waterings. All the time, she received mostly water. If you have good quality soil, you don't necessarily need to use lots of fertilizers or chemicals actually to grow cannabis plants. What basically you need for a successful grow, presentation is a little bit longer than I expected. Those are the 3 factors that are really necessary to have conditions successful grow. First of all, the environment your plant is going to grow in, then nutrition, but like I was explaining you, this is actually either most of the time in the soil, you don't necessarily need to add extra fertilizers, watering, and of course, genetics. What we have to understand is that no matter how hard we're going to try, no matter how perfect our growing environment can be, no matter how perfect our nutrition can be, you will never force a plant to actually achieve more than what it genetically can. It's just not possible. In this case, this is where the breeding actually comes out. Breeding is actually really interesting, and the thing is, you have to understand, you should always adapt to the environment the plants will be evolving in. Most of the seed companies in the Netherlands nowadays are working indoor, which means all the plants have been grown under artificial lamp in specific conditions. If you try to grow these plants, for example, outdoor in the south of Spain, where it's 45 degrees in summertime, or here in Nimbin, which is completely different situations, plants might not necessarily evolve the same because they are not meant to evolve in this kind of environment. When we want to grow cannabis, we actually should always try to aim to choose genetics that are meant, or actually that will try to adapt to the environment. Cannabis plant has amazing survival instincts, and even genetics that are not meant to develop in environment will actually potentially manage to be capable of developing properly in an environment they're not meant for. But this will take several generations. You will have to choose individuals that actually develop properly in some condition, and so on and so on. To develop a proper strain, we take between 7 to 10 years if we do it outdoor, because we need between 7 to 10 generations. This is the reason why lots of Dutch breeders started breeding indoor, because of course doing 7 generations indoor will go way much faster. We can do it in not even 2 years. In 2 years we can do 4 cycles per year, 8 cycles. Breeding is done easily. But once again, remember, yeah, those genetics are not necessarily meant actually for being grown in different environments. So this is why, for example, we've been working a lot, also trying to teach people choosing the right genetics, choosing the right medicine, because of course, depending on the patients, or even if you're just a simple recreational user, depending on your expectations of actually your experience with cannabis, you will need different genetics. This will be all for me, and now we're gonna have questions and answer. Please, if you have any questions, you're more than free to ask.
Just sing out for the microphone. Any questions for Charly? Where are my question askers? They're not here. One of them is about to speak. Here we go. Jeb, are you gonna?
I missed too much.
I will ask a question that was probably covered.
Oh, okay. In your opinion, is it better to do indoor organic just as far as having a controlled environment? And what are the benefits of outdoor growing? Like, just a quick synopsis of the differences.
No. Perfect. Well, me, if you ask my personal opinion there is no correct answer. It's, at the end of the day, is a matter of personal preference. For example, us in the Netherlands growing purely outdoor is a little bit complicated because of the weather we have, so we've developed a lot of greenhouse growing. Even growing in greenhouses, we will still use, for example, high pressure sodium lamps. Mostly the Dutch will use a lot of hydroponic systems. Every food, basically even the food we eat in supermarkets, is grown in a greenhouse under lamps using sunlight and lamps grown in hydroponic systems. Can be talking about tomatoes, strawberries. This is actually what is going on. The Netherlands, being a very small country, is at the moment the second food producer. So yes, this is the reason why. But after pure outdoor, pure indoor, in my personal opinion, either greenhouse or indoor growing, in a greenhouse you can still use sunlight and actually not be completely dependent on the elements. Outdoor is actually, if you have actually good growing conditions outside, depending on the places where you live, yeah, perfect, why not? If you have actually good weather, not too much humidity, not too many pests, wind, yeah, sure, why not? But if we really want to have a quality standard for medicine, in this case, yes, indoor growing, or in my personal preference, greenhouse growing, because it's a little bit less energy consuming, is definitely a better option. Just actually to have a kind of, let's say, standard product at the end.
Any other questions? Yep, there's one.
Is there much of a difference between the old sodium lights and the new LED scenario?
No, concerning HPS and LEDs, well, we have LEDs and LEDs on the market. As you've seen in the video we're showing, we have a couple of rooms with LEDs, and the new LED generation actually works pretty good. The problem is that they are still pretty expensive, actually, to acquire for the home grower. Let's say for a hobbyist grower, buying an LED panel for a square meter grow tent will still be around 800 1,000 euros, which will be around 1,500 Australian dollars, roughly, if my calculations are not wrong. This is the reason why people will still buy actually an HPS kit, because it will be actually not even half or a tenth of the price, depending on the model of ballast and reflector you're getting. Economically speaking, on your electricity bill, yes, you will see a pretty big difference. The fact you don't have to change your light bulb actually as often, because LEDs will last a little bit longer. Yeah, definitely they can worth it, but good growing LEDs are still expensive. You have lots of cheap made in China panels available on AliExpress and whatsoever. We've been given a couple of those in the Cannabis College. I can tell you one thing, I've tried them for 6 months, a year, and they just ended up actually in the garbage, and yeah, next one. They make really nice, actually, purplish colors, though. If you want to have a party, yeah, perfect.
Okay. Sorry, I was getting interrupted. I've
Please.
noticed that there's definitely a lot of Netherlands companies who do seeds. So, yeah, what's the legality of different companies in the Netherlands actually, for instance, peddling seeds around the world?
Well, actually, it's a very interesting question. Technically, cannabis is not legal, but hemp growing is. And the only industrial uses of the cannabis plant, of hemp, is actually to produce fiber or seeds. So this is actually the small legal term actually seed banks play with. And this way they can produce cannabis seeds without produce, they actually are producing cannabis, hemp, cannabis. The thing is that in Dutch, no matter if you're growing industrial hemp or recreational marijuana, we will actually only use the same word, hennep. So hennep cultivatie, that's the thing. We don't have actually a different word. And the law is a little bit lazy on that point. So of course, lots of different companies, such as the one I work for, Sensi Seeds, have been in the 80s taking the bridge and starting to do genetics. Now concerning the sending of seeds, it's a little bit complicated. We can send seeds all around Europe. From the Netherlands, you can send seeds to France, to Germany, to Spain, Italy, Portugal, Czech Republic, Austria, without any problem. In countries where cannabis is legal nowadays, just for example, Colorado in the US, different US states, Canada recently, South Africa, for example, it's still completely illegal to send seeds to those countries, even if cannabis growing is legal. And we actually receive, I'm pretty sure all the Dutch seed companies receive exactly the same amount of email every week asking, can I get seeds in Canada? Can I get seeds in Colorado, in Michigan, in Oregon, in California, in South Africa, in Thailand? Well, unfortunately, it's still against the conventions of the United Nations of 1971. So Dutch seed companies cannot straight send seeds to actually a certain amount, basically to the 2/3 of the world. You cannot send seeds anywhere in I would say Australia and all the surroundings, so it would be New Zealand, anywhere in Asia, to any African country, or anywhere in North, South America, Africa, Middle East. So yeah, except in Europe, almost nowhere, which is a shame. Laws are changing worldwide, but unfortunately, yes, the legislation doesn't go as fast as it's supposed to be. So of course, lots of people who are needing genetics cannot have access to them.
Is it true that... Oh.
Yes, please.
Is it true that if you have a special condition that you have to have the right strain with the right ratio of different things in it to make it work for you, like there's something like obsessive compulsive disorder?
Yeah, in what concerns medical uses is always a little bit tricky. In the college, this is something we actually are very clear about, just like the Nimbin Embassy. We are not doctors, we're not pharmacists. I would be a doctor, I would not be working in the cannabis industry, I would be working in a hospital. Well, if I had knowledge about cannabis, maybe, but in this specific case, yes, it's always a trial and fail process. A strain that works for someone with a specific pathology might not work for another person with the exact same pathology. But it's, once again, a very, very difficult subject. But yes, the ratios of different cannabinoids and compounds definitely come in action at this point. The problem is that in the industry, people focus about THC and CBD. At the moment, we have over 450 compounds in cannabis, and we still discover some every year. In my opinion, is actually the combination of all these different compounds that will have a certain actually medical value or not for a certain patient. Depending on those actually levels and also the morphology of the patient as well.
Stop. I'll come back. Sorry, we record all this, so we need to have you on the mic.
Oh yeah, I was told by somebody that if you just buy it from anybody, it can make you lose your memory. But if you've got the right medical one, it makes your memory better. That's what I was told by.
So no, let's put it like this. Memory loss, short-term memory loss using cannabis, no matter which strain of cannabis, can happen to absolutely anyone. Short-term memory loss is roughly, I take my phone, put it on the table, go to the bathroom, come back. Where the hell I put my phone? Oh, here it is. Damn, what have I done with my keys now? Basically, those will be actually the short-term memory loss. You will not become completely you will not have amnesia for cannabis use. Now, in the other hand, actually for medical users, once again, it's a different thing. This is why we always have actually to make a very big difference between recreational users and medical users. And in what concerns medical users, it's always a little bit tricky. It's always better, first of all, to actually get advice by a physician, your actually GP, your doctor, urologist, also on, and then actually with someone who has a little bit of experience, go on a trial and error process. If actually one variety, one strain of cannabis does not work actually for you, okay, let's pass, let's try another one, and so on, until we find something that works.
Okay. Oh my God, I've forgotten the question now. Just kidding.
Sorry.
I have it. There's a bit of a genetics question, actually. Okay, so you've got your seeds, and we know that the seeds have a certain genotype, but we know that when you plant those seeds and grow them, you can get a certain phenotype, so how the plant's characteristics. Is there at any point that you know it's not breeding true, that you can recognise that it's a phenotype that you don't want to keep going?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very interesting question. The problem is that when we talk about actually cannabis genetics, we always tend to forget one basic of genetics. Phenotype equal genotype plus environment. This is actually a notion that lots of cannabis growers and breeders tend to forget about, but as soon as actually, once again, you take a specific genetic out of its environment and actually modify its environment, it might, of course, genes might express themselves physically differently. And actually a selected phenotype might not actually evolve the same way from one point to another of the planet. This is seen actually very frequently with people sending actually themselves clones actually on the black market from the US to Europe or from Europe to UK and so on and so on. Yes, this is actually something that of course has to come in consideration.
So there's no way that you sort of can tell whether that's a phenotype that you want not to keep or clone off?
No, the thing is that, for example, once again, in this case, the trial and fail process is actually the best. Make selections of mothers and father plants is actually way easier, obviously, if we have a very big number of individuals. Breeding with 1,000, 10,000 plants is way much more easier than try to actually do breeding exercise with 10 plants.
Especially when it's
still possible.
Especially when it's illegal.
Yes, exactly. And that's the problem. The thing is that as cannabis is illegal, if you want to have a very big amount of individuals, it's actually a little bit complicated. This is one of the reasons lots of actually breeders started breeding indoor, but unfortunately the fact of breeding indoor also in the best conditions possible, if you take those plants out in little harsh conditions, they might not as develop as well. Me personally, as a personal opinion, but this is again really me personally and not involving whatsoever, I always think for breeding selection we should always actually mistreat our plants as bad as possible. Give them actually the harshest growing conditions. The harder the growing conditions are for the plants, the easiest they will show, for example, signs of hermaphroditism or deficiencies or whatsoever. Starting the points, we actually can select plants that actually are resistant to all the bad treatments we give them. Definitely those plants are the ones we want to select for the future. For example, for making feminized seeds, we will use all kind of possible stress to be sure plants do not turn hermaphrodite just like this. We will use water stress, light stress, nutrient stress, really pushing the limits on the environment level. And most of the time, while hermaphrodism is actually very present in the cannabis genotype. But some plants are not. Some plants are way much more resistant than others. Those are the ones we would like to breed with. Now we can determine, genetically speaking, with over 90% success rate, if we have male, female, or hermaphrodite plants, using cell tissue experiment. We will actually take some cells from the seed. The problem is that making tests on the seed, it's complicated and it's really expensive. We cannot, unfortunately, and almost no lab has the technology to do it. This is still very recent technology. So if, of course, these kind of methods become more and more popular and available, this is definitely one of the nicest breeding tools we could have. Just already being able to determine before actually what we're gonna have even before growing it. The problem we still need to do it the old-fashioned way. The first seed banks in the Netherlands, they used to actually have 10,000 plants per greenhouse. On those 10,000 plants, they will select 50. And on those 50, we will actually even reduce the numbers, and those were the individuals selected for reproduction at the end.
Yeah, that's very big.
So it's lots of plants for not that many results at the end.
Right, so breeding is maybe something that's not the realm of the individual home gardener, hey?
No. Actually, home breeding is still actually fascinating, and I would advise anyone to actually try it for a very simple reason. The moment actually you do it at home, you also actually have a better control on your environment than anybody else. Also, you become independent from the seed company, and you can make your own personal hybrid. Even if I work for a seed company, for example, myself, I still have my own personal hybrids at home that I make just for the fun of it. Some of them actually turn out to be pretty nice. Some of them were a failure. Definitely. But actually, genetics is fun. After, it's a matter of personal perspective. That's one of my hobbies, but it's all depending on you.
Hey, Charly, thank you a million for coming halfway around the world to visit Australia and Nimbin.
No, well, thank you guys actually for receiving me, and well, thank everyone at the Hemp Embassy, and here I have MardiGrass. You guys have been great, and if you have any last question before we go?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if people do have other questions, basically you're hanging around for the weekend, so definitely feel free to go and chat to Charly personally. And you'll be appearing again on a few panels as well, so we look forward to... Oh, and you're actually competing in the Fringe Hemp Olympics this afternoon, right?
Yeah, apparently. Should be fun.
So see how good they are from the Netherlands. Hey,
Well,
thank you,
guys,
Charly.
Thank you so much. Bye.